precise activity or point in time when I started thinking about this was actually just a few days ago, and a friend of mine in one of the larger European cities, financial center, who is a financial analyst, I told him a little bit about some of the inside aspects of the subprime failure, and he had told me that he had received a memo regarding the the activities of the egalitarian pressure groups such as Acorn and La Raza and all those in creating the subprime markets problems. And also they've known for a long time that Greenspan had a lot to do with it, and now the fact that he was implicated in this it's not very hard to swallow. So I think that this the whole thing that I've been talking about during these last two videos, and now I think it's definitely starting to enter the minds of financial analysts and various influential people within the financial markets of Europe, because it affects them too. I mean, debt securitization is perhaps, if not the prominent aspect of globalization, is one of them. Debt has never been securitized across the globe, which is to say that the risk of financial debt has never been spread internationally to the extent that it is now. So basically, whatever happens in one country is the business of everybody else. The egalitarian doctrines that affect our outlook and our economy has never been so worldwide to the extent that it is now. So I can imagine that there's going to be pressure from Europe as well, to some extent, as well as Asia, of course, regarding a little bit of pressure to make markets a little bit more realistic and not do ridiculous things like try to put people into houses that cannot pay their own mortgage. It sounds just so obviously ridiculous, and it's caused worldwide impoverishment instead of enrichment for the poor working class, as it was supposed to. Of course, it just was a failed social engineering policy, and basically everybody involved suffering. I don't really think anybody got out of this unscathed. Maybe a few people made money, and a few people got bailed out of it, but in the long run, I don't think anybody's going to say that this was a good idea. But the fact that memos about egalitarian lobbies, and I'm using my own words, but the fact that memos about what the pressure for subprime was, where it really originated, because that's what financial analysts do. They really dissect all the information available to them. And the friend of mine that I was talking to about a year ago was pretty enthusiastic about the concept of immigration into his country. He thought that it would benefit the economy as an aggregate. However, now I asked him if he still felt the same way, and it seemed that he was having second thoughts. So that means that our movement at this moment in time, in real time, is not just a group of poor or middle class social misfits. It is also it has a real consciousness amidst elites. The extent of which it does, I am absolutely not sure. I have very little access to the minds and to the hearts of what is going on in anybody in the world. You know, I mean, even myself to a great extent. All I know is that there is a dissemination of knowledge regarding subprime that would be very, very damaging to the egalitarian lobbies and pressure groups within the U.S. and worldwide. So their credibility has really, really been hit, not just in the U.S., but in Europe and in Asia as well. Because this time, it was not just something in the public schools and in the universities where they, you know, spout nonsense. This was the culmination of all of that ideology being put to use in the credit markets. So this time it hit people, you know, big shots, and it hit them hard, and now they have to be forced to look at it. So we're kind of in a historical time. On the very superficial level, it might seem on the outside, oh, now America is moving towards socialism, and the whole world is moving towards socialism, one world government, and open borders everywhere. And, you know, I've heard these types of gripes from people. And on the outset, it might look like that. But also, I am very, very hopeful and optimistic for the future, because the subprime fiasco will come as a wake-up call to people within the financial world, and as a result, that's going to have a backlash in decision making about where people put their money to finance things. And the people that are in the pressure groups and the people that have all the power to do this stuff are not going to find the open purses that they used to find. Maybe in the short run, but in the long run, in Europe, in Asia, in all these places, no. I mean, you can put a gun to people's heads in the U.S., but there's very little credit left in the U.S. People are getting their credit from Europe and Asia now, especially the government. So for those of you who think that Barack Hussein Obama is going to be able to spread the wealth around, I see absolutely no way he will be able to do that. I'm sure he would like to. I'm sure perhaps the majority of his followers would like to. But the only way to spread the wealth around at this point in time is to absolutely cannibalize the American economy. I mean, Soviet style. And you are not, I repeat, not going to find an Asia or a Europe as willing to engage in such experiments any longer.
United Europe, the Spiritual Prerequisite by Julius Evola. The first practical step in forging a united Europe would be the withdrawal of all European governments from the United Nations, a hypocritical organization if there ever was. The ground for a European initiative can be carefully prepared, but the problems of concrete political tactics fall outside the scope of this essay. Here we can only point to what we believe must be the form and the spiritual and doctrinal basis of United Europe. Federalist and associative solutions, economic and military cooperation, these are all the manifestation of presuppositions about the organic character of Europe, or the lack of it. The condition of a truly European entity must be the binding force of an idea and tradition with which Europe is irrevocably linked. Some argue that the nation-state, being not divinely ordained but the creation of determined groups successfully rising to a historical challenge, is a model for the merging of European nations. According to this view, the spiritual precondition for a united Europe exists in the myth of a common destiny defended by the national revolutionary groups of Europe. This view is inadequate. The birth of the European nations was largely the work of dynasties representing a tradition of loyalty to a particular crown. In any case, the factors which created the European nations have been the very ones which have maintained European disunity from the 100 Years' War to the present day. Among those who possess a spiritual and traditional understanding of Europe, we can distinguish between those who believe in an imperium of the kind referred to above and those who talk of Europe as a nation. The concept of nationhood, in my opinion, is inappropriate. The notion of European unity is spiritual and supranational. Homeland, nation, ethnic groups subsist at an essentially naturalistic physical level. Europe, Europa Una, should be something more than this. The old nationalisms and resentments are only grafted onto Europe when a particular national domination is imposed by one nation upon the rest of Europe. The European imperium will belong to a higher order than the parts which compose it, and to be European should be conceived as being something qualitatively differently from being Italian, Prussian, Basque, Finnish, Scottish, or Hungarian, something which appeals to a different aspect of our character. A European nation implies the leveling and cancelling of all rival nations in or beyond Europe. So far as European culture is concerned, it is these days the stamping ground of the pragmatic European, the liberal humanist intellectual. His European culture is an appendage of democracy and the free world. In this sense, culture is the stock in trade of the so-called aristocrat of thought. In reality, the clothing of the parvenu, his badge of success. A genuine aristocracy of the intellect would not in any case be adequate for the task at hand. The reanimation of the European will and the sustaining of a European revolutionary elite who could make this a political possibility. What is more, every time that we try to give the notion of European culture concrete significance, we seem to run up against innumerable interpretations which leave us with nothing conclusive at all. Everyone has their own idea about what European culture is, and many Europeans feel reticent or even guilty about championing it, and so the parvenus can speculate to their heart's contents in the reviews of color supplements about all the latest developments in this or that field of art in such a way that culture becomes entirely divorced from the serious world, from what matters. Ironically, much of what the defenders of culture admire plays a major role in helping to bring about a spiritual crisis and lack of confidence in European culture. The westernization of the world has meant that this decomposition extends across the world. Thus, Europe, from Illuminism to communism, has become the breeding ground of the very forces which work to destroy everything which is specifically European. We must create a unity of fighters. This is a prerequisite to set a vision of the world and of Europe aside as irrelevant.